Well, what we've had today is a marking of the 150th anniversary of the Fenian Rising here in Tipperary. To do that, we've held an event organised between Borrisoleigh Historical Society and the Ormond Historical Society, and a number of people have come together, picking up on that event that happened here and looking into the whole background and bringing things together and taking, I think, something out of what happened last year in 1916 commemorations.
The importance of having events like this, they recall and recapture events of the past, something that people may not have learned in their history going to school or have read much about, and it reawakens an awareness of the sacrifices that were made by our forebears to bring about the freedom that we enjoy today, and their aspirations and goals at a time when the country was on its knees, just a few short years after famine and all of that.
The whole idea of 1916 would never have happened without 1867. And not alone, would say, did 1916 inspire the likes of Dan Breen, Sean Tracy, Sean Hogan. I mean, their traditions went back to Fenian times as well. And that spirit stayed alive in Tipperary.
Afternoon and welcome to Glenkeen, this fine graveyard here. Thank you all for coming today, and to our piper Joe Barry for leading us in, and our colour party from 12th Infantry Battalion, thank you very much. Our organisation of National Ex-SERVICEMEN from Nina for coming here today as well, and to you all indeed for coming. I, like the organisers here, we're not party political, not belonging to any particular party or allegiance, but we do want to honour our republic, our Irish Republic here, and to pay tribute to the generations who worked to give us this republic, and hope we can learn and go forward with it and take this republic forward to what we'd like it to be. As well as Jeremiah Bourke, as we gather here today, I look around this valley, and it's not just Jeremiah Bourke or the others who are buried here in this graveyard, but as we look around, I'm mindful today of a whole group of people who died in this area.
The Irish people of the world, we have suffered centuries of outrage, enforced poverty and bitter misery. Our rights and liberties have been trampled on by an alien aristocracy, who, treating us as foes, usurped our lands and drew away from our unfortunate country all material riches. The real owners of the soil were removed to make room for cattle and driven across the ocean to seek the means of living and the political rights denied to them at home. While our men of thought and action were condemned to a loss of life and liberty. But we never lost the memory and the hope of national existence. We appealed in vain to the reason and sense of justice of the dominant powers. Our mildest remonstrances were met with sneers and contempt. Our appeals to arms were always unsuccessful.
It was stated that Jerry Bourke would like to have some commemorative event in honour of his grandfather, who was a Fenian. So our Historical Society met on a number of occasions to plan this event and to put a programme in place that would be a fitting tribute to this noble Fenian forefather of Jerry Bourke's.
The 1916 commemoration was such a success. I was trying to see could I highlight the Fenian Rising, which my grandfather was involved in and was seriously wounded. That's why I was trying to look more into what them events, what was going on at that time. So now it's brought up to date with this ceremony here today, which I'm very happy with.
We're here to pay homage to Jeremiah Bourke and his Fenian comrades who struck out in freedom's cause 150 years ago tonight. Jeremiah Bourke was born during the dark years of the Great Famine. Whereas he himself may have been too young to remember those terrible days, when people used the last of their strength to get to the bottom of the road we walked on, so that their bodies would be found and given a Christian burial, rather than rotting in their miserable cabins. He certainly heard the stories as he grew to manhood. Small wonder then that he would be imbued with a desire to right injustice and a longing for freedom.
Like, if we were to, let's say, honour the founding fathers of the Irish Republic, I think it's important that we would start where that honour rightly belongs, and that's with the Fenians. And to be able to gather a crowd together like we gathered in Glenkeen today, with the colour party from the National Army, with ex-servicemen there. And to me, they're the modern day continuity of, we'll say, what was the Irish Army, the Fenian Army, that went out in 1867. Today, those guys can serve all over the world with the United Nations, but they're serving under an Irish flag. And that's who we are, and it's thanks to those guys that came out in 1867.
Today, having no honourable alternative left, we again appeal to force as our last resource. We accept the conditions of appeal, manfully deeming it better to die in the struggle for freedom than to continue an existence of utter serfdom. All men are born with equal rights, and in associating to protect one another and share public burdens, justice demands that such associations should rest upon a basis which maintains equality instead of destroying it. We therefore declare that, unable longer to endure the curse of a monarchical government, we aim at founding a republic based on universal suffrage, which shall secure to all the intrinsic value of their labour.
Where we celebrate today, we said the anniversary of the Fenian Rising in Glenkeen Cemetery, I suppose it gives an approval in a way to the vision of the men of 1867. And if we go through the proclamation that HANLEY has read for us, we see, the references that they had, of complete liberty of conscience, complete separation of church and state. And whereas the men of 1916 might have made an appeal to the gallant allies in Europe, the men of 67, they appealed to the working men of England. So maybe their outlook was maybe more republican than what was to follow 50 years later.
The soil of Ireland at present in the possession of an oligarchy belongs to us, the Irish people, and to us it must be restored. We declare also in favour of absolute liberty of conscience and complete separation of church and state. We appeal to the highest tribunal for evidence of the justness of our cause. History bears testimony to the integrity of our sufferings, and we declare in the face of our brethren that we intend no war against the people of England. Our war is against the aristocratic locusts, whether English or Irish, who have eaten the verdure of our fields, against the aristocratic leeches who drain alike our fields and theirs.
We ask you, Lord, to come down and bless the grave of Jeremiah Bourke.
A soldier's might is his disciplined way. He always feels in a better place to lead him on this weary world, to take him to a better place. Up and down the hill we go, with our woes in life and strife each day. A soldier's might, with his disciplined way, will be always ready for the next hooray. A soldier by, with his flagpole high, stood beside the grave where the old Fenian laid. Green, white and gold, it waved with pride, to see the Fenian sunburst unfold so divine. The people came on that cold March day to pay homage to us Fenian from 67, buried in renowned Glenkeen graveyard, with his soldier might and disciplined way, with his soldier might and disciplined way.
The importance of marking events like this, we live in a republic here, and we have to look back to the genesis of where our republic has come from, and the influences that came from America and from the French Revolution, which gave us the United Irishmen, which gave us Robert Emmet's Rising, which gave us the Young Irelanders here, and the Fenians were part of that continuity, and which eventually led to the Sinn Féin and the War of Independence, and obviously subsequently to the Civil War. So what we're looking at today is part of the continuity of our history as citizens of the Republic of Ireland here. And it's important we look back to those, to the people who did this, who sacrificed their all in some cases, but who certainly made huge sacrifices and whose lives were dramatically changed. Bearing in mind that this is just 20 years after the depth of the famine, the horrific famine which has seen 1 million people die, another 1 million people leave Ireland. The Fenians came out of that, were born out of that. So I think we need to always bear in mind this is where this country has come from.
School history totally ignores the Fenian Rising. We all learn, we'll say, about the Act of Union, stuff like that, the famine in our school history. But the Fenian Rising is just totally brushed aside, totally neglected. And I would say if 10% of the people that came here today knew really what the Fenian Rising was about before today, well, it was as many as there were. And from that point of view, for us, it was tremendous to be able to get that message across, create the linkage of our history and put the whole history in context for people.
Republicans of the entire world, our cause is your cause. Our enemy is your enemy. Let your hearts be with us. As for you, workmen of England, it is not only your hearts we wish, but your arms. Remember the starvation and degradation brought to your firesides by the oppression of labour. Remember the past, look well to the future, and avenge yourselves by giving liberty to your children in the coming struggle for human liberty. Herewith, we proclaim the Irish Republic, the Provisional Government.
And her blessed steel is shining like rivers of beauty that flow from each glen, from mountain and valley. Does liberty's rally out and make way for the bold Fenian men.
People are starting to think now the War of Independence period, the Civil War period is coming. How are we going to deal with Tipperary during that decade of revolution? How are we going to deal with the incidents that happened, the big events that happened? How are we going to mark those big events? And I think here in Borrisoleigh today we have seen an example of how that can be done. Rebuilding, joining together rather than dividing again, I think has to be the theme for commemorating into the future.
Ride homes of my childhood, there's no place like these. Thy mountains, thy wildwood, thy vale and thy lea. And no matter wherever I am doomed for to roam, I'll never forget you, Temporary, my home. I'll never forget you, Temporary, my home. Where the cascades roll down the dark mountains between, and the moonlight sleeps calm on the breast of me, where the bright river sparkles, their filtering foam, o'er like shamrock did fill, Temporary, my home, o'er like shamrock did fill, Temporary, my home.
Today we had a wonderful John Flannery's research in going to the National Archives, bringing us the exhibition material here out of that, the mugshot photos of the Fenians who were arrested. John has done huge work for us really in collecting the material, in writing up that material and in presenting it to the audience today. It wasn't just didactic where people are hearing, but just how John brought people and got them engaged in the story and listening to the story and feeding back in and drawing that relevance that I was speaking about between what happened 150 years ago and what's happening today in Irish society.
And spent a long time together in Paris.
The dream was there that they could put together a revolution that would free Ireland and form a republic. We said planning was going on, but the American Civil War, if you like, intervened and put things on the back burner to a large extent. But at the same time, it ensured that you had a huge contingent of Irish people in America that were trained in the use of arms and trained in battle. Following at the end of the Civil War in America, bit by bit, people started slipping back into Ireland. They were all military men, and they were all coming back with one idea in mind, that they would be here for a revolution. When the insurgents came out, unfortunately, it wasn't countrywide. It was isolated pockets, really: Dublin, Louth, Cork, Limerick, Clare, Kilkenny and Tipperary. It was very easy for the authorities then to crack down, and within a week, 10 days, the rising was all over, and after that it was only just a mopping up operation. Round up the rest of them, put them in jail, set up assizes, try them, and either jail them or transport them. Now, militarily, it was a failure, but from the point of view of striking, we'll say, the fire of resistance in Irish people, it was a tremendous success. You'd never have had 1916 without the Fenian Rebellion of 1867. And 1916 was the catalyst for 1919 to 21, which eventually ended with the treaty, which gave us the Free State, which evolved into the Irish Republic. So from that point of view, the Fenian Rising is tremendously important. And it was very important that we here in Tipperary marked it on this, the 150th anniversary. And we had an ideal candidate to mark it with, in that Jeremiah Bourke, who died in 1933, was the last surviving Fenian in Tipperary from the Fenian Rising. So it was great to be able to gather in Glenkeen, honour his memory, pay tribute to him, and create the context of his involvement in the Rising and the whole story of the Rising in Tipperary.
Going forward next year, we hope to commemorate events of a century ago, 1918, and so on, the various acts surrounding 1918. So, as I say, it's a work in progress for next year, please God.
Hopefully the future will come about through people working in this republic to improve the country.
We've come here today to honour Jeremiah Bourke, but also to honour the republic that we have today.
I mean, hopefully we create a bit of curiosity that people go away and dig a bit more for themselves and learn a bit more, and that we can preserve our history. And my hope would be like that the young kids that were there in Glenkeen today would be back there in 50 years' time. I'll be dead and gone. Most of us that were there today would be dead and gone. But I'd love to see that those kids would be back there in 50 years' time and celebrating the bicentenary of the Fenian Rising. And hopefully we've inspired something in some of them.
It's the place I was born and raised in, Borrisoleigh, my native home. You may travel far, far over to find a place like Borrisoleigh. Those winding roads